is just a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Scott McDonald all the way from Lehi, Utah. He is the former marketing manager for the California Dental Association. For 35 years, he has provided demographic data and analysis to general and specialty dental practices in every state in the nation. His education at BA and MA has been in the area of market analysis for professional practices with an emphasis on dental offices. Scott is a well-known author and speaker on the topics of site selection analysis, market segmentation, and persuasion strategies based on psychographics. His company is a source for customized demographic reports for every neighborhood in the U.S. He's also a regular poster at Dentaltown, which he joined back in 2003. Scott, I mean, what I love about you is dentists, there's, 80% of what sapiens believe is just mythology. And the 20% that science is known under an umbrella that 100 years from now, they're going to know so much more science that everything we believe today looks kind of silly. Sure. And these dentists watch these movies. What was that baseball movie, You Build It and They Will Come, where you build a baseball stadium in the middle of a cornfield?
Field of Dreams, yeah.
Field of Dreams. And so they start with, well, you know what? I just, 5 dental schools in California, and every one of them comes out of school and says, I want to build a dental office that's overlooking the ocean. Oh, wow. What a unique idea. I bet that's original. And they say that demographics don't matter. And I say, okay, then open up in the Congo. Go to Somalia. I mean, if demographics don't matter, go open up in Afghanistan. Because clearly, if you build it, they will come. And if you're just the best dentist in the world and you keep doing great and it's just hogwash. And 6,000 kids come out of school every year, and 2 out of 3 go to urban. And here we have 19,000 rural towns, and as many as 10% of them don't even have a single dentist. And so my question to you to start this rant, do demographics matter?
Well, you can ask.
And that should be the name of the podcast.
Are we in a people business or are we in a thing business? Now, I asked the question like this because a lot of people have the idea, our job is to treat teeth. Well, if you don't have people who are attached to those teeth, you're not in business, and that's the whole study of demography. Okay, now, Howard, here's the theory behind demographics. If you meet a total stranger on the street you've never met before, what's the first thing you notice about him? Want to guess?
Their teeth?
No, you need therapy if you think it's your teeth. You got to get out more, okay? No, it's a person's gender. Now, I know that's politically incorrect. We're not supposed to say that, but it's true. The first thing you'll notice is a person's gender. Now, have you ever noticed how nervous you get if you can't tell a person's gender? I mean, you'll stare at places you should not be looking in order to figure out a person's gender.
Did you guess my gender, or am I too metrosexual for you?
You're a little edgy. That's all I can say, Howard, just a little edgy. Now look, but the reason is the important thing. It's not like you're going to hit on the person because of their gender. It's because men and women don't make decisions in the same way. Therefore, if you know that you're dealing with a man or a woman, subconsciously you'll change your tone of voice and the vocabulary and all these other things. So here's the deal. If you know enough about people, you'll be able to figure out how to make those people do things or to figure out what they're likely to do. That's what demography is all a study of. So if we take a simple fact like gender, you already know something important. Look, there's no time in my life I'm going to turn to my best friend Rob and say, Rob, I want to borrow those pants. Those are nice looking pants. Men don't do that, right? Women trade clothes all the time. It's just a tiny difference, but there are many actually that come from that. But we were just talking about age before we went live. Does age matter? Do people make different decisions when they get older? Absolutely. And look, I'm at that age now where if I drop change on the floor, I'll count it to see if it's worth the trip. You know, it may not be. So age is obviously going to be important to know because predictive, what clinical services you're going to offer will depend on age primarily. There's not a lot of ortho that's going on in the senior citizen community, right? And how many people are doing perio on kids under 20? Yeah, I suppose it can happen, but that's not the primary age group. In fact, I'll go one step further. I actually tell you a fact. When it comes to ortho, if you want to figure out a place that is going to be good for ortho, you have to find a lot of 10 to 14-year-olds. Not that's where the starts are going to be, but 10 to 14-year-olds are an indication of where the area is going. By knowing that, I can evaluate a site and say, yeah, this is a great place for an orthodontist or a periodontist or a general dentist who wants to do whatever. So knowing things about them will tell you what kind of practice to have, your likelihood of success. And unfortunately, people look at competition as though it's the Holy Grail. Well, I just have to know how many dentists there are in the area and I'm fine. But that's assuming everybody is generic, including the patient base and the doctors. That's simply not true, is it? So you look at people about what they're offering, and you'll be able to say, oh, that person's making a practice that's going to work for this group of people, while the guy next door may starve to death because he's not relating to the people who are there. I found this when I was working at the California Dental Association. I first started working, we were just figuring out how dental marketing was working. And no one had ever done really any good research. So I started asking dental students about how they're making decisions on where to go. And I got to tell you, I got some of the stupidest answers I'd ever heard in my life. I thought these are supposed to be intelligent people. And they were getting things, well, a guy at lunch told me that things are going really well over in this place. Or my teacher mentioned this place. I'm going, you mean you don't have any original data? You don't have anything that's saying what kind of place is going to work for you? I was finding out people weren't doing good decisions with good data. So that's why I started the company. And that's worked out very well over the past 35 some odd years I've been doing this.
You've had DrDemographics.com for 30 years?
Yeah, I originally started off as a marketing company because the idea was to take information about the population and figure out how to promote the practice based on the population that's there. I still do marketing reports, but I eventually opened it, and it was Scott McDonald and Associates, and to help brand it better, I called it Dr. Demographics because I do demographic reports for doctors in every neighborhood in the country. And I have to just tell you, you know where I've learned about so much of this is talking to doctors. I mean, yeah, I've got all the market research data and the background in it. But one of the problems with people trying to give analysis is they don't know doctors. They don't know the practice enough. You know, if you look at that all-in-4 technology that's come out there, you know, where you know about that technology. Wonderful thing, but it doesn't work for everybody. And in fact, you have to find a group of people that are likely to have sufficient bone loss to say, oh, it's going to be a real seller in this population. So knowing something about who you're trying to reach makes the demographics matter. I mean, it's where you kind of square the circle, so to speak, with people. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah. I mean, look at Clear Choice. They're in Phoenix, a hotbed of retirees. They're down in Tampa. I mean, they are genius demographics. I think of all the corporate dental offices, actually think Aspen is the best unique in the fact that they go to underserved Medicaid, Medicare, poor areas. I mean, they're focusing on their customer.
Right. Well, they can make a dime in places that solo practitioners just can't because of the efficiencies. So you could look at an area and say, oh, this is going to be a great burn them down corporate practice site. There are a lot of places that corporate practices can't really survive because they don't have the population density to take advantage of their practice model. So I'm not trying to say there's a good kind of practice or a bad kind of practice. There's just an appropriate kind of practice for the people in the area.
Okay, well, I've been trying to get you on for a long time because the dental students, one of the biggest questions they ask is they're wising up. I mean, when I got out of school 30 years ago, it was a lot easier to start up a practice and survive than it is 30 years later. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. It's gotten a lot harder, and it's gotten a lot harder in some places than it used to be.
Yeah. So they ask, where do they go? Where do you go? So if my homies went to DrDemographics.com, what are they going to find? And specifically, this is Dentistry Uncensored. What do you charge? How do you help them? How does this whole thing work? Because I believe if they go, I mean, business in 3 words is supply and demand. Yeah. I mean, you know, if I went to Parsons, Kansas, I wouldn't open up a Mercedes-Benz dealership. I'd sell Ford 150 pickup trucks. I mean, if you get, you know, if I walked out of dental school and I had a chance to go to Yemen or Utah, and I picked Utah, that would be the most significant decision I made in my entire dental career. So yeah, I really, you know, when you come out of school with $350,000 in debt, your first couple 2 or 3 decisions got to be right. When you came out of school 30 years ago, you could screw up your first 3 decisions and still make it. So they got to get demographics right first. I firmly believe that supply and demand. They need to go create a supply of what the people are demanding today. So if they went to drdemographics.com, what are they going to find? I'm on your website now. What does it cost? What do you do for them? How can you help them?
Okay, well, let's start with something free, because most of these guys, like you said, are in debt. What they need to know is the process to define the right place to practice. So I have a little free exercise I put them through called Where to Put a Practice Part 1.
Is that on the mobile version? Is it under reports or education?
It should be under education. But if they just want to write to me at info@drdemographics.com, I can always just send it to them. And that's a link that I send to a briefing I do. I actually have several free briefings under the education section. That's because these young people, and let's face it, everybody kind of needs a little education, but they don't know what they're buying. So I figured I had to make it free. The other thing is I have low price products with the idea of saying you have to get a general idea of the area. So I have state briefings on most of the states in the country. It's $49. And what I do is I give them a demographic data that's updated every year on every city and every county in the state. So, you know, if I did have to divide up California because it's so big, but every other state that I do in this thing, and that's under the state briefings, I get them an explanation, I'm lecturing, I give them the data, and hopefully they've already gone through that Where to Put a Practice Part 1 that's free. So they can kind of get an idea, where's the need, where's the demand, how do I look at the data? So that's the first thing. I have a couple of products like the Best Sites Report, which is where a lot of people start. They'll say, I have a general idea of where I want to be. Help me evaluate it. Help me find the place that's going to work. Now, my competitors are usually very good about examining a specific site because they have data that they can say, oh, here's the metrics. What they don't have is enough knowledge of the practices of the profession and of the areas to be able to say, oh, look, within this 5-county area, here are the 5 sites that are going to work best for you. Now, they're not going to work the same for everybody because a one-size-fits-all thing in dentistry is not going to work. You have some guy who might be a Seventh-day Adventist going into an area, and he's going to try to build his practice with his initial launch on Seventh-day Adventists. Believe it or not, you can get that information. And I can actually tell you, based on the traffic and competition, where the specific intersections are that I recommend. That's what the Best Sites Report is. That usually costs about $795. Specialists are a little more, but not much. Then we have a specific site analysis. So if a person says, I want to go here, is it going to work? It's a viability report. It's what you put with your SBA loan to say, I've done my due diligence. I look at the area in 2 ways. I look at zip code breakout, the 14 contiguous zip codes, and also drive time analysis. Usually 5, 10, and 15 minutes. You need both, not just one. Because what it's going to tell you is how good is the area on the north, on the south, on the east, and the west, and that's why zip codes are important, because they are oriented around the site. Drive time is people's behavior, because not everybody drives 25 minutes to get to a dentist. They're usually going to drive 5 to 10 minutes.
But let me start. I'm trying to pretend that instead of being 54, I'm 24. My 30-year, I graduated May 11, 87, 30 years ago. We just had our 30-year class reunion. And I'm trying to think how a dental student thinks. And I want to back up. We'll use Utah, for example. I've heard on many people talk that Utah is the most competitive environment for a dentist. It's one of the worst places to go out of all 50 states. And I've seen other data showing that the average income for a dentist in Utah is in the bottom. Is that true?
No, it's not. It's not in the bottom based upon earnings. Let's talk about supply and demand. You talked about this. There are a lot of people who want to move to Utah. It's a place that if you happen to be Mormon or LDS, this is a spectacular place to go. It's very accommodating, but here's the other thing that makes people want to come here. It's growing. Utah has the highest birth rate in the nation, and in fact, by some measurements, is growing faster than any other state year to year. Its economy is picking up tremendously. You got a lot of high-tech engineers who are moving here. In fact, I can throw a rock and hit Google and Adobe and all these other places that have moved the bulk of their workforce here. So I'm not trying to sell Utah. I'm just saying there are a lot of people who say that's where I want to go, and therefore compensation rates are going to be lower because there's a lot of people who are fighting to get here.
But the question where I was going with that is, do you think if you're in dental school, and by the way, the Mormons in dental school, I grew up Catholic. I mean, in Phoenix, if you got 4, 5, 6, 7 kids, you're Catholic or Mormon.
Yeah.
A lot of the Mormons, they're the only ones that in dental school drop a kid or two. So a lot of my Mormon buddies came out of dental school 400, 500,000 in debt. They already had one
Yeah.
kid walking, one in a bassinet, and his wife was pregnant. If he said, "Well, my family's all in Utah or in Arizona, they're all in Gilbert, Arizona," would you say, "Slow down, Spanky. Maybe you should first go where you're needed, and then make money and fly back to Utah or Gilbert, Arizona, and visit your family"? Or would you say, "No, if your family's in Utah or Gilbert and that's where you want to live, we'll just figure out the best place despite all those disadvantages of supply and demand"?
Okay, well, let's put for a second aside the idea of supply and demand entirely, because a doctor needs patients. They need a referral base. They've got to start with what I call a natural constituency. Almost every doctor coming out of school will have some place that's going to be a better bet for them to go, because there's already people who can serve as a patient base. You start off with that. Even if you're associating, there's still people that you can build up as part of your practice. Now, it isn't necessarily Utah if you're LDS. There's LDS populations throughout, especially the Western United States. So you don't just say, Utah is where I want to go. Look, I'm going to tell you a secret here. If you are not from Salt Lake City, don't practice there. It's one of the most closed off areas, and I'm talking legacy practices, because Dad and Grandpa and Uncle Bob have all been practicing there. It's not practical. If you're from the area, it's a different story. If you happen to be an endodontist who wants to go to Salt Lake City, I say you got to think again. Because one thing about, and I am LDS, I will full disclose this, is Mormons are cheap. And they will tend to want to not just refer internally, they just don't want to refer at all. So there are certain patterns that we see with a particular population that you can identify that will make it better or worse to go to one side or another. And by the way, the biggest population of LDS people in Arizona is Mesa. That's the last place that you ought to have an LDS doctor go. Gilbert would be much better. Avondale, even Tucson. Different situation. Now, let me go back and say one quick thing, because I don't want you to get this religious thing too much, but look, I handle a lot of different groups by their ethnicity and their race and their all that. And I have a lot of Persian doctors. And one of the Persian doctors, almost every Persian doctor will say the same thing to me. "Scott, I don't want any more Persian patients. They're very hard on me." It's a truism. It sounds bigoted, but it's a truth. And almost every one of them will say it's true, because we're buddies. Come on. Therefore, I'm not looking at just a single factor, but several factors that will say this site is better for you than that. In fact, I had a kid who was in, I think it was Newport Beach in Southern California. And he said, "Should I go here?" And I went, Newport's kind of not a great place to be. I mean, tell me about yourself. He says, "Well, my mom and dad are both professionals. They use their own names in practice. I grew up working in their office." I thought, well, that's a good thing. "I went to high school at this local high school, and I was the head of the football team. I have a lot of friends living there." Well, that makes it a good place to go. You can't just look at the competition ratio, you see, because the kids got to make a living, and you make a living on the people who need you, or who know you, or who.
I want to say something about the Persians. I had several Persian friends. There's about 1 million Persians in Southern Cal. And in fact, the United States is so cool because in so many countries, the largest population of those people that live outside of their countries in the United States, like Poland, is Chicago. In Iran, it's Southern Cal. So much that. But the Persians say that when they work amongst themselves, everybody demands a discount. And if you don't give them a discount, then they're mad, their feathers are ruffled. They said, "I'd rather go to an area where there are no Persians and people come in and pay rate card, fee card," so every ethnicity is different.
And let me just really get myself in hot water, but this is supposed to be uncensored, right? So
Right, it is Dentistry Uncensored.
All right.
And when we talked about age, how you said you treat an older guy different than a younger guy.
Yeah.
The thing I love the most about being 54 is you can get away with so much more stuff when you're lecturing, when you're doing stand-up comedy. No one's going to throw grandpa under a bridge. But if you are young, 25, and hot, you're held to a higher standard. So we're so old, we can just get away with saying anything.
I have no filter anymore, and my grandkids all know it. You know.
Yeah, and they're cool with it.
They are. So it's one of those kind of nice things about your age and about experience. Because by the way, when you lose a little hair, people go, "Oh, I trust you more." Odd as that may be. So I was going to talk about black doctors. Look, they have the hardest time with black populations, and often do much better when they're not working in a black population. If we look at the Chinese, okay, we'll use them again, getting myself into hot water. There's different language groups within the Chinese population that are like the Great Wall of China. They're so different. The Mandarin, the Cantonese, big difference. And in fact, a Cantonese speaker will often look at the Mandarin speaker with a little bit, I don't really like you very much. And it's far worse than if they're dealing with somebody of a different race or ethnicity. Because of that, you have to know more about the doctor to say, this is the right place for you to be. This is the place you can grow. Now, can I just say one other quick thing that's on my crusade right now? We have to help young doctors find one thing primarily in the places they go, and that's growth. If there is not growth, and I'm talking about growth in various ways we define it, population, economic development of a particular population that's moving into an area, we're not helping them. Because growth is the thing that is going to help these people build a practice. So many people have these areas that are dying. And I'll just use an example, the Finger Lakes area up in upstate New York. It's not growing. There's some wonderful people. I love the area. Rochester's great. Troy, Albany, I love those areas. But the problem is they don't have enough new employment to sustain younger families moving there. So the population's moving up in its age range. It's a very tough place for them to practice. I'm not saying it can't be done.
I want you to go back to the black dentists. Are they having the same problem? Do black dentists in the black community have the same problem, the same reason the Persians do in Southern Cal? Is it that their people want discounts, or what issues are they having?
No, it's not based on discounts. There's now you're getting into some rough territory. And this is based on psychographic studies. And you really have to understand the basis of sociology and anthropology to understand it, really. But here's the deal. There's different subgroups within every race, and they're motivated by different things. There are a lot of people who are African American who are self-loathing. Okay? I've said it. One of the things that they know is a lot of times a doctor who is really successful, a very good clinician who's black, is accused of being white and being culturally not one of the people. However, if a person does act like a guy in the hood, they don't trust him for that reason either. So a lot of times what he's got is the preconceptions that are in their own background, their own population, that make it more difficult for them to succeed. That's the basis on that one. But it's different than the Persian population, where the discount is a manifestation of, unless you give that to me, I don't trust you. And so Michael Barone goes through all this stuff. He's a wonderful political anthropologist and demographer. To really understand how people work, you have to kind of borrow from other fields to apply them to dentistry. And it's all a little bit different, Older people, poor people, rich people, they all have a different motivation. And if we look at all the cross-section of their demographics, it'll help us direct what kind of thing is going to work for a particular group. Now, one quick little thing. I'm actually one of the rare demographers who actually does telephone consultation with people, so they can talk to me.
What's your phone number?
916. Well, let me give you the 800. 800.
No, hell, if they need a toll-free call, you shouldn't even. I tell everybody, cancel your toll-free calls. They're on an iPhone. They're on. And when they graduate $350,000 in student loans, I don't care if they're a Mormon with 2 kids already. Did they buy a $50,000 Honda Accord? Did they go on a cruise? Did they go to Disneyland 3 times? I mean, I have people email me and ask me if there's a toll-free number that they can call me on. I'm like, really? That's what you think of me? You want me to take my time, email me back a free number so you can talk to me? Why don't you go screw yourself 8 different ways? Wow,
okay. And that's why it's uncensored, Howard. Okay.
I mean, the nerve people have. So it's 916-928, or what is it?
The office number is 916-928-1903.
916-928-1903.
If you want to order a telephone consultation, you have to buy the half hour first. And you do that online by going to drdemographics.com and signing up for the session on the telephone consultation. Because frankly, I'm a busy guy, and I try to schedule these effectively.
And if you are a complete cheap bastard, the 1-800 number is 1-800-424-6222, and then you should have that forward to dial a prayer.
Well, and here's the thing. You're not going to talk to me. You talk to my staff. Because
I want to say one thing. You're talking about that African Americans tend to be self-loathing. I get a lot of feedback from Canadians too that they say, "I wish I practiced in America, because in America, if you're successful, you go on the circuit, everybody loves you. But in Canada, if you become successful and you tell anyone or stay, everybody looks at you like, what are you in this for the money? What's wrong with you? You know, you shouldn't."
Yeah.
Why are you talking about your economic numbers? And it's extreme in some other countries where you just, if you're doing good economic, you don't talk business and healthcare in many other countries.
Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right. And by the way, I have a guy who I refer to. If somebody from Canada wants to know, you have to know Canada, because the folks there are different. And certainly the Quebecers are going to be very different from the Ontario residents. So knowing the differences in Canada is a very important thing, particularly in dentistry. And by the way, people can get offended in Canada like nobody's business. I don't even
trust Canadian dentists. I mean, honestly, seriously. I mean, how can you really love dentistry and love hockey at the same time? The sport that knocks out more teeth and causes more anterior implants and bridges. I mean, would you trust a dentist who likes hockey?
Only a man who loves curling is worthy of my trust. Okay, and I'm Scots. Okay, my background is Scottish. I'm totally Scots and cheap. All right, there. But I want to do the full value thing. So just make sure the telephone thing, if they call that, they'll get my staff who can answer questions about our products and services. But if you want to schedule with me, and I talk to people about everything. You'd be surprised how many people are going, look, I have an idea.
Okay, but I want to ask the question. These are, in fact, I got a message in my mailbox right now. I just got it on my Dentaltown app, my private messages. He says, okay, Howard, if you're coming out of school,
mm-hmm.
and you got $350,000, he says, of student loans, I'll go anywhere. When someone says, I'm single, I have no biases, I go anywhere, I want to go to the best place available. I mean, they asked that broad of a question. How do you start a conversation with, I'll go anywhere, I want to go where I have the best chance of servicing my student loans and getting out of debt someday?
Okay, I always say North Dakota, that's where you ought to go. And they will always say the same thing. I don't want to go to North Dakota. Then I said, you won't go anywhere, will you? Look, I publish every year a Places with Promise list, and I just did that recently. The Places with Promise podcast we did shows us the top 10 sites in the United States where there's growth and development that I recommend you look.
Okay, that's on your website under reports?
Yeah, that one, it would be on my podcast, and you have to look in the section under podcasts. And
by the way, I'm mad at you on your podcast section. The townies, they tell me they find most of their podcast from the podcast section on Dentaltown. I started doing podcasts, just started section, but now 20 people are posting their podcasts. You don't have your podcast on there.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you, Howard. I don't know how. I haven't really wanted to take advantage of a public forum. But now, look. A little personal bias with me. I think there's too many people trying to make a buck when in fact they really ought to be sharing more. And that's why the podcast things, I have that on my Facebook, and we're going to be aggressively putting it out on Twitter and some other things, but you can always go to iTunes and find the perfect place to put a practice podcast.
But if you, over 50,000 dentists have downloaded the app, so they're going to work and they scroll down, and it's a great marketing. And a lot of people say that they listen to the first show, they found it on the app, and then they later subscribed to it on iTunes. But almost everybody that started listening to their shows on there said their iTunes numbers.
Where do I go on Dentaltown to be able to register that podcast?
Well, on the top bar it says, "Is it help or more?" I think it's a help section. And here, let me. So it's under under help, and you go to help center, and
okay.
then it's got the instructions for everything. And then also, if you get stuck, there's you can always email Bridget at farranmedia.com. That's Bridget at farranmedia.com, and she can help you. But the instructions are all there. But I think it's the best free marketing you can do for a podcast in dentistry?
Well, today I just posted one on, it's called Priced Out of the Market. Places, the cost of doing business is so high that I'm recommending steering away from those areas. I know that should say, oh, go here, but I also talk about the places that are the lowest cost of doing business in the country for a dental practice. And the reason that that's so important is because I'm afraid that with so much debt, we're increasing how much risk the doctors have. We've got to find places that that's lower. So I'll tell you what, I will go ahead and register my podcast on Dentaltown. You should look for it later this weekend, perhaps, or whenever the staff can put that on. But I really love the idea of good, solid data that isn't going to cost a lot of money. So that's what my podcast thing is all about. I actually will be very specific with people. We also had, by the way, the section on the kiss of death, locations in the country that are shrinking. And would you like to know one of those?
I'd like to know all of them.
Illinois. Right now, Cook County is bleeding people at a rate which is phenomenal, and nobody wants to talk about it. Therefore, are you saying, oh, you can't practice in Chicago? No, the opposite. In fact, I believe it's a good place if you've got a good broker. But you've got to have somebody who knows practice transitions in order to get into a profitable practice. Otherwise, you're taking your life in your hands by trying to do it on your own or do it on the cheap. It's a terrible place to do that. So, you know, and that's why, by the way, Indiana is really promising to do pretty darn well, because it's best thing about it is it's not Illinois. Same thing's true, by the way, with Arizona. One of the best things about Arizona is it's not California. So a lot of people are making that move. And that's one of the big trends I'm noting is called the middle class exodus. A lot of people are picking up who are your primarily good patients moving out of town because the cost of doing business is killing them.
So my 30-year history of my dental office here, I mean, I'm in Ahwatukee. It's actually Phoenix, Arizona, but everybody in my neighborhood calls it Ahwatukee. It seems like 20% of my practice for 30 years was all leaving California, and there was all small businesses, and they said, you know what? My boss, they passed so many regulations that my boss said, you know, if we just move our factory to Arizona, I can be profitable again, but if I stay here and implement these regulations, I'll go under. So they were regulated out of California. So what you're saying is you like growth. So states that are contracting are losing population. And see, Kansas is flat because every time a girl gets pregnant, a guy leaves town.
Yeah.
And
happens a lot.
yeah, and so you but back to the growth rural. Is that more? Do you believe the urban rural is that a fundamental thing?
It's a little more nuanced than just say rural is good, urban is bad, because that's not true. The thing is, there's a lot of rural areas that are doing very well, but what you're looking for is a crossroads community. You're not looking for one that is going to be out in the sticks. There's not enough population density to support a full-time practice, and I mean
That's me calling you.
Practice. Is that you calling me?
Yeah, that's me.
It's great. Do you want to talk on the phone, or do we just keep?
I'm confused. I don't know if I should call you or podcast you. I'm just teasing. Yeah. So yeah, there's more to it than a simple statement, urban or rural.
Well, you know, for example, there are parts of Colorado that are doing spectacularly well that have low population density because they've got so many.
Are they doing well, or are they just smoking legalized pot and think they're doing well?
Both, but no, they're actually. It's the crossroads communities that are springing up, and I can take almost every community, every state in the United States, and there will be a crossroads community. That's where a quote-unquote rural practice will go. The thing that makes it successful rural is that it has a draw area that is a reasonable isochrone. I know, big word. An isochrone is a time distance measurement. You know that if you have sufficient people who are accessible to that site, you'll do well. They may not have a ton of people in the neighborhood. That doesn't matter. So those practice models are working great. But I've seen a lot of people who go, oh, I just really want to be where there's nobody else. And I'll go, you're out of your mind. Not a good idea, because you need lots of people with teeth, or at least spaces to fill those teeth. You get the idea. Ideally, we're probably going to find a little bit of an increase in the rural market, because there's a long-term trend that's about 5 years in the making in which urban areas are going to kind of suck for a while. And that is because of the cost of living. not the cost of doing business, but the cost of living. So, for example, within San Francisco, the median home value is 1.29 million. San Jose, it's about 900,000. We're finding doctors who used to think, I can live anywhere. I'm rich. I'm a doctor. Can't afford to live there. School teachers and policemen and firefighters can't get a place to live in these metropolitan areas. Well, they have to do something. Also, the young millennials who've been living, caught in an overpriced apartment are kind of going, this sucks. I don't want to do this the rest of my life. So the projected trend demographers are saying is they're likely to head out of town. And a significant percentage are going to those low density areas that are going to be cheap to live but have great internet access. And that in itself, it's the amenities of what a population wants that makes it desirable. That's what we're looking for, So some places are just, northern Arkansas, the good example of this. They used to be really in the Tules, not a good place to go. Bentonville on the extreme west side, kind of go across the top of the state. They've developed an infrastructure that's far better than it used to be. They've got good transportation accessibility in their roads. Trains are better. Airplanes are now flying into Arkansas far more than they ever did. So it makes a place you go, yeah, I want to live in Arkansas. The cost of living in Arkansas is a fraction of it is in most other big states. And by the way, Florida, for example, is really picking up on the east and the west coast, as well as on the north side of Florida, because the cost of living and the number of people who are educated are a great draw for the people who are employers. Now, Howard, let me give you one little thing called a right-to-work state. I don't know if you know much about right-to-work states.
Hell yeah, I do. I live in Arizona. It's a right to work.
It is. Now, a lot of people don't like that because the salaries tend to be a little lower. But I don't think there's any of the right-to-work states that have gone to that $15 an hour minimum wage Kool-Aid. And I mean the Jonestown Kool-Aid, not the good kind, It's made it so expensive that there's almost no growth in those communities. So if you want to say what's the big definition of those growth states, look up a right-to-work state. Remember, Ohio just became a right-to-work state. So did Kentucky. Tennessee and Kentucky were fighting each other because Kentucky was not a right-to-work state, heavy unionized. They just changed over last year. The growth in jobs will make the opportunities for a dental practice significantly better to be able to go to Kentucky than it has been.
I think the minimum wage is the most racist, one of the most racist policies in the United States, because when you grow up in the Hispanic community, every kid who's 10 years old can get a job with any uncle doing construction, plumbing, pushing a lawnmower, whatever. They all have access to a job.
Yeah.
But then you go into the black community where more parents are employees, and then the good old government says you can't get a job for 16. And from age 10 to 16, they're sitting there, well, how do I get some extra coin? And I tell you what, I started working for my dad at age 10 with John Lease, who's now an endodontist in Southern Cal, and he used to pay us a roll of pennies for a shift. And then when we got like 12, he upped it to a roll of nickels. Then it was a roll of dimes. Then it was a quarters. And that was, I think of all the education and mentors and leadership we gotten, why can't a 13-year-old kid in a poor neighborhood get a job at Starbucks or McDonald's as opposed to what? Sitting home and having idle time and no mentorship? Right. It's just horrible.
Well, we're being regulated out of having youth work. And so I'm not trying to sell a particular state, but I'll tell you see it in Idaho, Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and Texas, where you'll go to a grocery store and you'll see a kid 14 who's bagging your groceries. In California, you probably need a master's degree in order to justify bagging anybody's. Oh, I'm sorry, they don't use bags in California anymore. Unless you can carry it in your arms or you remember to bring your bags, you're in trouble. Now, that is hurting some states. And I'm a Californian, by the way. I come from California. It was hard to leave, but the economic change has been terrific. I believe that the economy will die not from anybody else outside attacking us. I think it'll be suicide. And the difference between one state and another is becoming so much greater on how easy it is to set up a practice, to raise your kids, to make a living and keep that money. In fact, that's one of the statistics I've started tracking this last year. How much money do you get to keep? It's one thing to say, oh, look at all the compensation rate I'm getting. I'm getting $86,000 a year in New York, that state. That's a lot of money. But if it takes $600,000 to buy a median home, it isn't practical. You know what I mean? So it's what will your money buy that also has to determine what locations are going to be good for you. Because your rate of return, yes, some states are going to, like Utah, will have a lower compensation rate, but the tax rate is in the floor. It's very low. Cost of housing, it's very low. And the cost of staff, which happens to be your largest line item in your budget, is low because they don't force you to have these very high minimum wage things. So anyway,
labor is no longer the largest line item cost in dentistry. It always was, but it is no longer.
What is it now?
It's the adjusted production from your fee. I charge $1,000 for a crown, but 82% of my crowns are on a PPO, paying me $600.
Okay, that makes sense.
So that adjusted insurance production, averaging right now in the United States, is about 42%, whereas labor is about 28%. I mean, when I got out of school, I got more for a crown and a root canal 30 years ago than I do today.
Well, that's because you were better back in the old days, right?
Well, it's just what is the trend moving forward. I mean, the trend moving forward is everything's going to get better, faster, cheaper, higher quality, lower cost, and more miniature. And if you try to buck that trend, that's been the economic trend since the Industrial Revolution. I'm going to ask you another question. I know what you're going to answer, but remember, my job is to guess what all my homies are thinking.
Okay.
And when they're in dental school, they think there's a ratio. They think you should not go to an area that has 1 to 2,000. You should go to an area that has 1 to 1,500. And by the time it gets down to 1 to 1,200, it's a no-go. Is that oversimplistic?
It's very oversimplistic. And I'll tell you an example, a little thought experiment. Back me up on this. If you have a ratio of 1,400 to 1, that's about average in the United States in most practice areas. Now, it can go down to 900 to 1 if you have a very motivated, well-educated population. I bring the point up about education of the population. It's not something that dentists often think about. But a person who is thinking far ahead will tend to think of preventive care. They'll say, oh, yeah, it only makes sense to have endodontic treatment because I can keep the tooth as opposed to just yank it, doc, give me a denture. The quality of the endodontic care is superior to the denture. But a lot of people don't think in those terms if they don't have education. So when you talk about what is a reasonable ratio of dentist to population, you have to look at the demographic character of the population. If you happen to be in an area that's very poor and everybody's depending on Medicare or something like that, some other public assistance program, they're only going to come in when they're in pain. That's the only reason they'll ever come in. You're going to need about 3,000 to 1 of that population. Now, anecdotally, we know that so many of those people will go through that pain crisis and they'll get treatment, but they'll never come back. Therefore, you have to keep replacing the population that you're serving. A recall population is far more cost effective. And education and money, median household income, is something that is going to help you. So it's a pretty big difference between 3,000 to 1 and 900 to 1 and even lower. That's the simple answer, by the way.
So on Dentaltown, we have 50 categories, and one of the categories, the one you're under, is under office design and location. And then so one of the subsets is dental demographics. Do you think that's a good area for people to go to learn about dental demographics under that thread, or do you post in other areas? Or
well, here's the thing. I usually look for a keyword and try to respond to it, like practice transition or geographics or office site. I'm all over the map. But maybe I should be doing more in that subcategory of demographics. The problem is a lot of people don't understand what they're asking for when they look for demographics. They'll think, oh, I want the ratio of population to dentists, which, yes, I suppose that's a demographic, but that's not going to be the thing that they most need. They should be looking for an area of need, places that are growing, a demographic character that is what my practice should be built on. I get into the area of practice site selection as well as market segmentation or marketing. And by the way, there's a little problem. It's not exclusive to Dentaltown, but it happens on Dentaltown a lot. The people will talk about social media as though that's marketing. Social media is a little tiny part of it. but it's not the whole thing. We talk about branding, and that's a whole field, and market segmentation, which is part of psychographics. People haven't got a clue about, and it's not such an easy category to go into.
Well, it's emotional anchoring. So you're a millennial. You hate going to your mailbox, getting a bunch of direct mail. You throw it all away without looking at it. You don't think they should cut down trees and blah, blah, blah. So you just think it's horrible. But then when you actually talk to people making millions and millions of dollars direct mail, they say, okay, well, if only you want to do implants, you mail it to everyone over 65, and 1 out of 100 comes in and does an implant case. Ka-ching. So just because you don't like something doesn't mean it doesn't work. And all the millennials, they live on Facebook. So they want to believe that they're going to build their practice on Facebook, and it's laughable.
Well, it is. One thing it's also laughable is we don't understand the idea of matching content with a patient type. Everybody believes there's one message that's going to make everybody in dentistry or everybody out there go, oh, I want to go to the dentist. And they'll show a blonde couple where the husband and wife are smoochy and they've got great teeth and they've got a kid on their back and we're having a good time. That image is not working anymore. It's become so generic in itself. But there are messages that will influence people to come in and seek you. I'll give you an example that's a little extreme. So Howard, don't blame me because it's a little extreme. But you know, if you could tell someone I can save your sex life at my office, you say, well, how could you do that? All right, well, maybe it's going to be sleep apnea. Does snoring cause a problem in people's marriages? Yeah. Is a dental procedure, are there dental procedures that can actually cure that? And the answer is absolutely there are. Are there things that can give you a reduction in pain or greater sex appeal or, tooth whitening or bonding or bleaching, things that don't necessarily have to cost a lot of money, but will have a result that people want? In fact, one of the big things I believe is if we understand people sufficiently, we'll know how to craft a message that will be a benefit statement, not a feature statement. Too many dentists are talking about the features of their practice without talking about the benefits of why to come in.
You started out doing marketing for the California Dental Association with that. I mean,
Right.
how prestigious is that? Then when you started your website, you started out as marketing. Are you still doing any marketing, or are you purely demographics?
I do a marketing report where we'll take the demographics and the psychographics of the area. I'll look at what the competing practices are saying and doing and recommend a message and a medium that's specific to them and their situation.
You know what I have to say about websites? Of my best friends that I spend the most time with that are dentists, and I know every intimate thing about them. Like maybe they're addicted to placing implants and taking every implant CE course on demand. Then you go to their website, you would never ever get that from their website. I mean, it's like everybody I know, their website has no reflection of their passion, what they're doing. It's almost like they went to a convention at Salt Lake City and walked by a booth and gave some guy his credit card and they built him a website 5, 10, 15 years ago. And it's kind of like you don't call your own number. Why would you go to your own website? It is one of the biggest disconnects. Do you agree or disagree?
Oh, absolutely. And one of the problems is too many doctors are being uninvolved in the messaging of what they put out. They will assume that the guy who runs their website, the webmaster, knows everything about dentistry, and they may not know a thing except 15 paragraphs that they'll tend to put in here and put in there, and there's a tremendous crossover. Look, what you have to answer on a website is simply what makes me different from everybody else. And why should you come in? If you can answer those two questions, well, you've done more than the vast majority of dentists. There is a thing called the health belief model. I don't know if you've ever familiar with this.
Absolutely.
1966, a fellow by the name of Rosenstock came up with that theory. These are 7 constructs that will make people do what they need to do as far as their health. And he, by the way, started this thing working with dentists. He tried to come up with what is it that is going to make people get off the dime. And it's brilliant. It's on Wikipedia. I could sell it, but, it's good research. It's out there now. But the manifestation of it, how you show vulnerability or susceptibility, that's one of the constructs he has, is going to be different for every group. So it's not just a message you can throw out that's good for everybody. But unfortunately, I keep seeing this thing where someone will put up, oh yeah, I have a CEREC 3. Nobody knows what a CERIC 3 is. They don't know what the advantages or the benefits. All they know is somebody's got a CERIC 3. Doesn't help. Or I don't know, maybe.
And dentists do that. Physicians and lawyers, like, you don't see lawyers saying, hey, come to my office. We have artificial intelligence and we have every legal thing. And physicians, they don't sit around saying, oh, we just got a new color MRI. I mean, dentists are the only ones who talk about their toys. And you're saying that it really doesn't matter to the patient.
No, in fact, I think it's harming the relationship because people come up with an expectation of toys, that makes the better dentist, and I don't believe that it does. Look, what do people want when they go to the dentist? And not everybody wants the same thing, but if you can figure this out, that's where we talk about the market research. It will say that you've got a lot of people who are likely to want and need these particular procedures and things. If you miss that, I don't care how brilliant you might be or how many toys you've got, you aren't going to have a successful practice.
Yeah, and the other thing about the same-day dentistry thing, it's like, that's funny. I've been a dentist for 30 years. Every time I tell someone they need dentistry, they only have 2 questions. Are you going to hurt me, and how much does it cost?
Yeah.
I get like one person a decade that says, I really want this done the same day. So why is that all the noise you hear in dentistry? But I want to make one key about when you talk about the health belief model. I was halfway through after I did my MBA, I started getting my master's in public health, and I got halfway through it and then got this wild ass idea to start Dentaltown and didn't complete it. But the health belief model that you said started in 1966, it was replacing the 2 million year model of the medicine man, where every time you got sick, you went to a doctor, a witch doctor, and he either made a lotion and potion or he took out a sharp iron knife and cut something off. And that's still the predominant healthcare system. Every time in America someone has a problem, oh, I have high blood pressure, oh, I want to take a pill, or I got blocked arteries, oh, then cut out some plaque. They don't want to do the health belief model that maybe you should change your behavior and take medicine onto yourself. There's 1 million MDs in America, and 80% of them still operate as a witch doctor that goes back 15,000 years or 30,000 years.
Well, if you were to ask the question, what's going to change in healthcare overall, I believe that it's going to be a little bit more direction toward informed understanding of the patient, what their needs and wants are. We can't just say, oh, I'm smarter than you, here you go. We have to make people want what they need. Remember, there's only 3 things that a doctor can do. They can diagnose, they can treat, but the third thing is, and this is what everybody forgets, they can make people want the treatment or understand why it's important. And only a doctor can do that. If you're successful in doing that, I think your practice will do pretty well. But you got to understand, you're in a people business, not a thing business. You know?
So my, I always tell the patients all day long, they say, well, why should I do this? And I said, well, first of all, when your dentist and dental assistant and dental hygienist are 65 years old, 20% of them won't have lost all their teeth. And when they're 74, it's times 2 that amount. And I just say, if you do what the hygienist tells you, you'll never see me. And the minute you quit doing what the hygienist tells you to do, then you're going to see me again.
Right.
And I also love when people say, well, how much is a root canal? I say, I don't know. I've never had one. I do what the hygienist tells me to. I see her every 6 months, and I don't have root canals and implants and bridges and all that. But what you ought to do is quit listening to your insurance company and start listening to your hygienist. If she says come in 3 times a year, then go in 3 times a year. If you say, well, the insurance company says come in twice a year, I said, well, what if you had 4 kids and didn't want to have any kids anymore, and you wanted to have a vasectomy, but your insurance said we only do castrations? I mean, if you want to get your nuts cut off, go for it. I would recommend listening to your doctor and get the vasectomy. But yeah, it's that health belief model that the doctor can give me information as opposed to I'm a victim and I can only get what Medicaid, Medicare, Delta, and Blue Cross and Blue Shield pay for. You know what I mean?
Sure. Well, it's ethical persuasion, isn't it? Isn't that what a doctor can do, is actually make people want something? And that is an ethical thing, even though, as you said at the beginning, there are some countries, and Canada's one, boy, I'll tell you, Holland is another, that's just terrible. They don't want doctors to talk to people. They merely want them to be responsive to a patient, telling them what to do. And bad things happen, especially when it comes to drugs. People are giving out all kinds of drugs because it makes people happy, and they get a good score. Well, that isn't a particularly ethical way to treat, but it makes people happy.
Yeah, Amsterdam that is a neat place. I love it. So I know you're gonna hate this last question. I only got you for like 4 more minutes, but
Go ahead.
again, I just know what they're thinking. They're listening to you. They're on the way to work and everything. They just say, okay, but just tell me where I should practice. If they're thinking that, what's the next step? Just tell me where to go. Where do I
Okay.
want to go?
They have to do a little reflective thinking about where the places are reasonable they can go. So let me just say real quick. Everybody has limitations on where they can go. Nobody can really go anywhere. For example, a guy who's got a divorce, he's got a custody situation, he's not going to move far away from his kids. Therefore, there's a limit to how far he's willing to go. That's reasonable. You can't get licensed in every state. Not every state is growing, or there's not practices for sale. So we have to be realistic about what people's desire for their practice career is going to be. That's why I want them to start with a little bit of that know thyself, like the Oracle of Delphi said, know something about yourself, about what you want, and then let's match up the places that will do that. Sometimes it's just going to be getting on the phone with me. I know that may sound dumb, but for a fairly small fee, we can talk about what your opportunities are and then narrow it down by research into what specific sites are going to work for you. I may be able to tell you a county to go to and certainly a state, but not every place is available to everybody for a lot of reasons. And a lot of them are very personal.
And what do you think about the ethics of this? Because they do it in stock market. I mean, the stock market's based on the greater fool theory. I mean, when you see the stock market from 1994 to 2000, it was crazy, and you sold your position. It's unethical because you're selling it because you think it's going to go down. You're selling it to a greater fool. Do you work with a lot of dentists who realize, my God, my area is going downhill. This is not a good place.
Oh, yeah.
I live out in the suburbs and I'm commuting an hour each day downtown. And now I want to find a greater fool and unload that dental office and then wake up in the morning and drive an hour out of town I mean, do you do a lot of transition consulting for the
Yeah,
practice transition based on the greater fool theory?
absolutely. Well, I hate the greater fool thing because look, what is one
Okay,
man's
the bigger
treasure is another's
dumbass theory.
treasure. So look, the idea with practice transition is if you happen to be living right next door to this wonderful office, but it's an hour and a half commute for the other guy, you have the advantage of being there. Viability of the site is an objective criteria. It's not a thing that is, well, maybe this will work and maybe it won't. No, you have to have a good reason why it's going to work, and that's why the research is going to answer that. And I also ought to say something, Howard. If an area sucks, I'll actually say it sucks. All right. We can, in research, cannot get into this business of trying to make a dime. For instance, I'm not allowed in my own ethics to get compensated on the sale of a property. I can't do that. I can't be able to say, yeah, I'm going to get money on this, and it's just a great site. A demographer can't do that. A broker, a realtor, a lawyer, that's a different side. But for me, no. I have to be honest, and sometimes that is not good news. That's a problem with me, and I've had a lot of people get mad at me. But I'm not reluctant to say those are the facts, and here's the way I analyze it.
What letter grade would you give the average national practice broker on ethics and morality? Unloading a horrible office onto a young kid for way too much money, or do you think the majority are doing the right thing? What letter grade would you give them?
I think right now the majority are doing the right thing, and the reason is because they're going to get sued if they don't. Usually, if they misrepresent a property and there's a substantive reason that they do it to make it sell, trust me, they'll be out of business in just a couple of years.
And know something about yourself. Remember, it's not just a number. It's not just a ratio. It's not a dentist for every 2,000 or a dentist for every 900. Like say you were a pediatric dentist and you're going into a small town that had 15 dentists. I'd want to know what percent of them 15 dentists loved pediatric dentistry, or which ones were normal and hated it. And with the specialty getting thrown out of court in Texas, to where Texas said the American Dental Association does not set specialties; they're a membership organization, and threw specialties out the window. I have for 30 years I've seen dentists sit there and say, you know what, I've been doing dentistry for 10 years. I just love endo. I have 4 kids. I can't go back to endo school, but I found a small town in New Mexico, and there's 8 dentists in this small town, and 8 for 8 hate endo. And I'm going to go there and say practice limited to endodontics and they're all going to give me their endo, and I'm not going to hire a hygienist, and I'm not going to do the final crowns, and I'm not going to be a family nurse. So there's so much more to demography, isn't there?
There is, absolutely. And that problem of the specialties we've been dealing with for many, many years. There are some specialties that I worry about in some areas much more than others. Now, remember, if you're in a relatively small area and there aren't a lot of specialists there, trust me, people are grateful if you're willing to do third molar extractions, especially because some people don't want to spend their weekend digging out root tips in someone's sinuses. You know what I mean? Other people are really good at it. Well, the market is deciding people, it's kind of shaking out, who are better at it and worse. And if you're in a smaller community, a lot of people are going to tend to specialize or subspecialize in something that they do.
I want to. We went over the hour. Can I keep you in overtime for a minute because you went
Yes.
off on a genre that.
If you're having fun, that's all I care about.
Well,
Right.
it goes back to, I know I repeat myself a lot, but the remote control theory. I mean, I've never been in a home where anyone knows how to work the remote control because there's too many damn buttons on it, because it's all about all the different departments at the manufacturers. The DVD people want their buttons on, the VCR, the cable, and everybody crams all these buttons on and no one knows what it is. And then there's companies like Apple and Google say, no, we start with the customer. We start with the customer, and we're going to get rid of all these damn buttons and make it simple and intuitive. And I've lost, I look at so much data about how one-stop shop hospitals or clinics or whatever, they're so much more successful. And that when you tell grandpa that he's got to go to 3 different specialists, the follow through for a third is just, they literally throw the referrals away that day. They don't even go. So, so if an endodontist or a periodontist or a pediatric dentist or so many of these specialties came to me and say, well, where would be a good place to go? I would say, well, you already got $350,000 in debt. Why would you want land, building, and a practice? Why don't you go find 5 general dentist offices and work 1 day each so the customer can come in and get their root canal and their surgery and their implant and their pay? Because one-stop shopping is Apple. It's Google. 9 specialties spread out is your damn remote control. I just think that specialists rotating through offices would be best for the consumer, the patient. And I think wanting the patient to have to go to 9 different specialties is an old ancient tribal thing. It's kind of like when you let your dog out in the backyard, the first thing he does is he goes and pees on all 4 corners. He just wants his own place, his own ranch, and he doesn't want any dog crossing the yard. And isn't that kind of old school monkey sapien weird business model that's kind of going to go the way of the horse?
It can be. And look, I don't want to make a blanket statement that isn't true. And one of the things is, in some locations, it really works to have a lot of subspecialists. I deal with a lot of healthcare, not just dentistry. And I've got like a pediatric rhinologist who's trying to figure out, where do I put a practice? Now,
pediatric what?
Rhinologist, so kidney for kids. Now, he's going to be in a very rarefied area. And you could say, well, hey, a kidney's a kidney if it's a kid or a not. Well, that's not true, really, because you got a kid attached to it, and you don't treat kids the same way that you do grandma who's, 68 years old. So, yeah, there's a lot more tolerance for a subspecialty when you look in some areas. And in some places, it's a fact of life. You're not going to find an endodontist in some communities. And if somebody rises to the top because they like doing it a lot, it only makes sense. But one of the things that I'm going to go back to is that isochrone thing, the time distance measurement. A lot of people don't want to go a long distance. They want to stay closer to home. And for a lot of people, when it comes to a specialty service, 30 minutes is about as far as they're going to go. And if they can't find a provider closer, forget it. Now, by the way, that differs based on urban density. So in Manhattan, people will not travel 5 minutes or more. They've got to be right next door. You happen to go to Kansas, people will drive an hour to get to almost anything, including the grocery store. So their tolerance for distance is different. But your point is well taken. There's a convenience factor that I think is actually increasing, particularly as the median age in the population increases. They just don't want to make inconvenienced anymore. And that's why the enclosed malls are dying. That's a major trend that we're tracking in demography. Remember Jacoby and Myers used to be next to Swiss Colony in the mall?
Well, Amazon's growth has killed retail. There's every time Amazon goes up another $1 billion a month in sales, there's tens of thousands of measurable square feet of retail that's being closed down. I mean, it's all moving on. But, you know, I'll go back to, I'll draw a comparison. Did you hear about the dating website OkCupid? She did a TED Talk. She was getting her PhD in mathematician, and she, you know, mathematicians like take a bunch of numbers, whether it be from weather, stock market, whatever, and make order out of it. And she asked Match for their data, and they gave it to her, and she tried to see what sense she could make of the numbers. And the number one variable on getting a date and ending up in marriage or whatever was geographic location. You're not going to date if you're in Utah. You might have a great profile in Montana or Idaho, but really you're in Salt Lake. You're going to just limit it to Salt Lake. Demographics do matter, and I think I just think that's everything. But man, I'll tell you what, I think the world of you. If you ever want to write an article for Dentaltown magazine, you know, Tom Giacobbe is the guy there, Tom at dentaltown.com or Tom at Farran Media. If you ever do want to do an online C course, I'm on a mission that, again, when you come out of school, $350,000 in student loans, that's okay, but let's try to make the first 3 or 4 decisions. Let's try to get A's and B's on your first 3 or 4 big moves. I mean, we're still in a situation where when you buy a practice, every bank has told me and on this show that they don't even have a 0.5% failure rate. I mean, it's still, they'll still loan you $750,000 because being a dentist is still a good gig. You might think it's a bad gig, you know, but it's still a good gig. But gosh darn, it's so much nicer to go to a right location. Last question. I know I keep saying the last question. This kid wants to know, is it better to come out of school, find a great location, and do a de novo, start up my own from scratch, or buy an existing? From your knowledge of demographics, is there any blanket statement you could say to that?
It's always safer to buy. And the reason I say it's safer to buy is you're starting off usually in a positive flowing of cash. The problem is if you don't have any cash, it can be a real long year that first year. If you're standing out in front waving at people passing by, please come in, I'm starving. That's why it's safer. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to make the same amount of money. But Howard, the thing I believe, and I'll even say this in favor of Dentaltown for that reason, it is so much more complex to run a practice than it ever was before. Not only do you have to have regulations and accounting and all the other stuff you have to go through, there's so many demands that the various states are making. Like this thing about having to be able to offer multiple language services in some states in every dental practice. My gosh, who thought that was a good idea? So it's just hard to do. And I think the learning curve is high. We're expecting a lot from the young doctors, and I'd like to have them be able to get their feet wet first, if at all possible. So getting as much information as possible, especially through experience, helps a lot. Now, do I still think it's a better career in dentistry than to go into a lot of other careers? Oh, yeah. Heck yeah. Absolutely, yeah. Because I think you can actually pay back your student debt and the loans on your business for most practices. But again, you can't just be naive and wander out and say, well, where's an empty space? Where do I go? I don't think that can happen as easily anymore.
Yeah, now they're saying that in 20 years, 50% of all jobs could be threatened by artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
I mean, and we're still doing hands-on surgery all day long. I mean, it's going to be a long time before R2-D2 and C3PO can do a root canal.
I just say this. I agree with you, but as automated as I can make my demographic stuff, there's still people who want to get on the phone and cry a little bit. And I have to listen sympathetically to their situation and help find a solution. I don't believe that automation can easily handle that. There's not an algorithm that you can pull out of your hat. Therefore, I don't think that there's a place that you can remove people from people equations. But I still think automation is making everything that I do a lot easier. I couldn't have done this, I don't know, 30 years ago, really, as easily. I've got all my data on my computers. I've got modeling I can do. I can train my staff better. And I can have almost instantaneous contact with huge numbers of people. I think that's great. I love that.
So you're going to put your podcast on Dentaltown?
Are you kidding? Yes, I will. Yeah.
Awesome. And I hope you write an article or do something because, again,
I will.
I'm trying to get your word out big time because it's just when you come out $350,000 in debt, let's try to get demographic. Let's try to get an A in demographics. That'd be really, really nice to get an A in demographics, especially since once you start a practice, it's not something you can just pick up and move. I mean, dentists,
Sure.
they're not very transient. They're not gypsies in a mobile home. I mean, they usually buy a practice, and the average one's going to be there 30, 40 years, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I've just done articles for New Dentist Magazine and Dental Economics and stuff like that. I've got something I bet will work for Dentaltown. So look for that space to come. All right.
All right. So, my gosh, thanks so much for coming. It's Dr. DOCTOR demographics.com, Scott McDonald. And by the way, are you related to McDonald's?
No, I'm not. Thank you, Howard.
Are you Irish?
No, Scottish. Scots. Elginshire.
But Mick is usually Irish.
Usually, but
not in your case.
To be my branch, they were Jacobites, and they changed the name a couple of times. But yeah, my grandfather's off the boat Scots.
Scott, and they invented copper wire.
That's what I've heard, and I'm not getting compensated for that either.
Two Scots fighting over a penny created copper wire.
Wow. Racist and an ethnicist.
But it's so funny. It's so funny because there are many cultures that are really pro-business and cut cost.
Yeah.
And the Scots, I've lectured in, a gazillion, 50 countries. And I guarantee you, I'm not making this up. I just lectured in, where were we at, Glasgow? Glasgow. It's one of the only places where every time I've lectured there, about every 5 years, last 20 years, 9 dentists will be at the table. And when they bring the bill, they spend 20 minutes deciding who had what. And twice we were in a time crunch, and I said, screw it, I'm buying everyone's dinner because I don't have time to watch 9 Scottish dentists decipher this bill. Is that true or not? Yeah, and I also was paying the taxi. 4 guys pull up to a taxi, and 4 Scottish dentists want to divvy up the taxi fee. It's like, are you out of your mind? It is a serious cultural thing. And that's where I saw the statue of who wrote the Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith, a Scot.
Yeah.
And one of the greatest works of economics ever written. Thank you so much for coming on my show. Thank you so much for what you do for dentistry, and I hope you help a lot of kids make their first demographic decision better.
I bet we will. And thanks again, Howard, for all you've done. We really appreciate you.
All right. Well, thank you, buddy. Bye-bye.